I begin, I will give a major disclaimer. Roblox, as of recently, has had quite the rise of a smaller community of story games. When you think of story games, assuming you played them, or at least heard of them, you probably think of the story games made in the late 2010s and 2020. Camping, Break-In Story, Vacation, Daycare, Field Trip Z, what have you. But that's not what I'm talking about. After a little single-player psychological horror game called Jim's Computer dropped, it set the seed for all the single-player psychological Roblox games to drop, and most of them are... I'm gonna be generous and say that quality is iffy. Yep, I have played many of these psychological games, as most have a lot of overlap between them and story games. Something I notice about these games is that for some reason, it seems like it's just a bad omen if you make a sequel to games like this. It is bound to make the original game worse in a sense, or just not be as good. Overcomplication, hypocrisy, and misunderstanding, and victim blaming are issues that these games seem to face. I have never played a Roblox psychological game that has a good sequel if it has one. Ugh. I want to talk about my problems with these sequels, mainly because, well, I want the developers to improve, and also if you ever want to make a sequel to your psychological game, if you have one or ever make one, to try and not fall into these pits that these games have. Also, side note, I will be talking about the issues I have with the original game, as most of the time you can't make a good sequel without a good foundation, and also most of these games' issues do bleed into their sequels. So yeah, let's just get to the very first game.
Just a heads up. I had 3 games in here originally, and as you could tell by the introduction, I removed one after recording. All I will say is that it's because of stuff that came out about the developer that I can mainly describe as an edgy teenager who is chronically online. Don't witch hunt this dev, please. They're still a kid and doesn't deserve to be harassed. With that said, we will get back to the video.
Are there any games where you just know you hate it, but you can't put into words why? Like, you come off watching a show and there's just something irking you about why it's bad, but you have no idea how to explain it. You can't put into words why it's bad, so you just default to the popular and admittedly wrong take. I know I have. It's how I felt about This Is Why. I knew I didn't like it for some reason. At the very least, I could tell that there were a couple of issues I personally had, but like, I couldn't really put it into words effectively. It feels very subtle about its issues, honestly, when compared to the other 2 games, but it's in a way where once you notice them, you cannot unnotice it, like how the Minecraft cursor is off-centered. I'll wait. Honestly, I only realized this because This Is When dropped, and also I looked at some of the reviews for This Is Why, but we're not gonna really talk about it too much. But there were a few things that I could tell I just didn't like. Such as the mother character for the main character, Viper. Okay. The mom character is displayed as generally a bad mother, quote unquote. To kind of fit with the narrative of this game, she doesn't believe in autism. She's kind of a bitch, but you know what? It's not really too bad, I guess. And then you get to the party scene and it's just... What? After the first school day, Viper goes home to the fact that his mom threw a party for him, and like, after a bit of time when Viper thinks a little, he realizes that, oh, there aren't any guests. Which... his mom fucking reminds Viper that he has no friends, and presumably only threw the party to rub it in. What? I'm sorry. Huh? This feels like an evil mom that a 13-year-old would write, but apparently it wasn't written by a 13-year-old. It was written by someone in college. Honestly, this character reminds me of the mom in Prank Your Mom. The character that relishes in the fact that she's abusive towards one of the characters and turns into a fucking demon. At least I can give this game the thing that I can understand why Viper's mom is not like the fucking devil and doesn't deserve to have CPS called on her, unlike Prank Your Mom. She feels like a caricature of a shitty mom that hates her son. You know, I can kind of see why some of the reviews of the game say that it demonizes all holistic people. I personally don't have a comment, as I don't really lean either way in that argument, but I can at least understand where people are coming from. Though, the mom is just a small issue I have. I mean, this game is supposed to bring awareness about the struggles of autism. You know, portray that autism isn't just an ooh-woo quirky disorder. Yes, I'm going to be saying that a lot. Deal with it. But just that, a disorder. Well, I will say right now, Pepper's portrayal is fine. I have no comment about it, nor do I feel like I have as much authority to say that, yeah, it is a really, really good representation. But I can at least say it is not a very, very bad representation. And most honestly, the reason why I say it's fine is because it boils down to, yeah, it's not my experience, I can't really say anything about it. No, I'm not gonna. I can actually believe that Viper is autistic. It's, at worst, fine. But what about the other autistic character? You know, the one that was added later on. What the fuck is her name? Maria! The most forgettable character in game behind the friend character, the Lexi. Legitimately, the only thing I know about her is that she's nonverbal, which, by the way, is kind of an issue. It's almost like the developer went, okay, so I'm getting hate for the representation, and apparently I didn't make it clear enough that autism is a spectrum, and no two autistic people are the same. Despite the fact I said it many times. Maybe I should make a new character. Okay, cool. That could really help. I mean, show don't tell. So who is this and how are they autistic? Well, she's a girl who is nonverbal and uses a tablet to speak, and her name will be Maria. Okay, what else? Excuse me? What else is there to her? I mean, the autism spectrum is vast, and there's more traits than just being nonverbal, so, like, how else is she autistic? Why does that matter? Because you're supposed to show that the autism spectrum is vast? Okay, but we say she's autistic and she uses a tablet to speak. Besides, she isn't the main character, so why does it matter? She's supposed to show that autism can be presented differently! This is the issue I have with Maria. She has nothing to her aside from being nonverbal, being autistic, and being Viper's friend. There's like nothing else to her. Which, for the fact that that is supposed to actually show that no two autistic person is the same, she is so lazily written. You couldn't have, like, added some sort of scene that showed that Viper is very hypersensitive with taste. In other words, he has a hard time handling strong flavors. Meanwhile, Maria is hyposensitive with taste. In other words, she has a hard time even registering strong flavors. Heck, Viper has been shown to hate eye contact. In that case, you could have made Maria stare into your fucking soul, but I'm just writing a fanfiction at this point. Okay, so we have 3 characters aside from Viper who get a sort of focus. So who's the third? Lexi, and dare I say she was one of the best portrayed parts in This Is Why. Which will seem absolutely insane when I get to This Is When. Lexi is shown as an attention seeker, using autism as a way to gain attention, and using it as an ooh-woo quirky disorder. I found her annoying, which is good actually. That was the point of her character, to be annoying. So why the fuck does she believe she actually has autism? I feel like if you're going to make a character like that, she She seemed honestly at least a bit self-aware. Am I reading into this too heavily? Like, why did you make her into someone who is self-diagnosed and ignorant? And yeah, this is my last issue and biggest issue in This Is When. The belief that self-diagnosis is actually really wrong, and you are the worst person in existence if you think that you can self-diagnose, which... Okay, I just need to run through this. How the fuck do you mess this character up that badly?
I went on a rant and I want to make my points a bit more clear. The main point I was trying to say in the rant was that from what I could tell, Lexi was, intentionally, using autism to gain attention and seemingly knew she didn't have it. However, either I was wrong in this assumption or the developer changed it. She was made ignorant. The problem I have with this is that it's treating ignorance as the same as maliciousness. No, not all of the self-diagnosed people on TikTok are intentionally faking. It is more likely they are ignorant. If you say something that you didn't know was a slur, you don't deserve to be considered the worst person in the world because you were ignorant. It is different if you knew that the word was a slur and using it as such maliciously. I will go more into if self-diagnosis is valid or not in a moment. I did my damn research and you should too. No, asking ChatGPT does not fucking count. Go through actual scholarly sources for it. With that said, we will get back to my voiceover.
It's ignorance. All of it is ignorance. Like, I really can't see Lexi as a bad person if she's just ignorant. Yeah, you know what? Let's actually talk a bit about self-diagnosis and Lexi and how, like, the betrayal of self-diagnosis is bad. With evidence! Yeah, that's right. I have sources! I did my research! Lexi is a caricature of people who self-diagnose. A girl believes autism is an ooh-woo quirky disorder, misuses terms that describe facets of the autistic experience, etc. Though, how valid is self-diagnosis, and why might someone self-diagnose? According to an article published by the University of Colorado Denver, down the rabbit hole of self-diagnosis in mental health, quote, simply finding an explanation can be cathartic, and it can create access to communities that provide normalization, support, and validation, end quote. The author, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing this, HARASS, goes into how there is a significant part of the population who do not have access to mental health care. In other words, HARASS states that sometimes self-diagnosis is a necessary step due to mental health care being inaccessible or unaffordable. To put it simply, self-diagnosis is more times than not a step to a professional diagnosis due to the reasons stated prior. In fact, I can actually give my own reason why I was one of the people who self-diagnosed prior to getting a diagnosis, and why I wasn't diagnosed sooner. I was suspected to have ASD when I was a little kid, because I went to therapy because I was diagnosed with other stuff prior and I was a little shit when I was in school. However, despite the fact that my therapist did bring that up, my mom did not want me to get diagnosed due to how I was treated when I got my other diagnoses. She noticed how I was treated differently due to what I had, and she didn't want me to be treated any more differently due to an ASD diagnosis, which is why I wasn't diagnosed until 2025 in fact. Taking into account why someone might self-diagnose, I stated a part of Lexi being a caricature is she's a girl. Why might that be? Well, one of the common reasons why someone might self-diagnose is due to being a part of the quote-unquote lost generation. As stated in the article, Autism Identity in the Lost Generation, structural validation of the autism spectrum identity scale and comparison of diagnosed and self-diagnosed adults on the autism spectrum. McDonald finds that of the self-diagnosed individuals whom self-diagnosed with autism, they were more likely to be older, women, or employed than those with a diagnosis. To back this up, many sources, such as sex differences in the timing of identification among children and adults with autism with autism spectrum disorder states that most of the time, females were diagnosed later than males. Quote, survey data were collected in the Netherlands from 2,275 males and females with autistic disorder, Asperger's syndrome, and PDD-NOS. Among participants below 18 years of age, females with Asperger's syndrome were identified later than males. Among participants greater than or equal to 18 years of age, females with autistic disorder were identified later than males. End quote. To put it simply, it is extremely common for girls to be missed. At least to state why self-diagnosis can be bad, it should be noted that it can have negatives, which I do think it was one of the things that this is why I was trying to show, but it did so poorly. HARASS acknowledges how social media often glamorizes disorders, as well as currently most self-diagnosis is driven by anecdotal information. It is noted that, quote, while this certainly increases awareness and destigmatization, very much needed, it can also be a double-edged sword by fueling and perpetuating big amounts of misinformation. And that main negative right there is why I don't see Lexi as maliciously faking autism for attention in This Is When. Those negatives are the reason why she seems more ignorant than anything. As well as why, unless she is proven to be outright malicious and completely using autism as a way to gain attention, I cannot get behind her deserving no friends. To conclude my biggest issue with these games, it creates one-dimensional characters just to seem bad for the sake of a "woe is me" feeling message. The way it took to show autism is diverse is the most basic, boring approach possible, and also one of the laziest. And finally, the attention seeker character was turned from malicious to ignorant, and still treated as if she was malicious. Yet, no matter what, I can still see good in these games. If not, it is a little preachy and on the nose, but I can still understand why someone might like it. The next games, however... Oh, brother. Before I get into this section, I would like to give a major warning for some extremely sensitive topics discussed. This section will discuss school shootings, murder, violence against women, sexual assault, and possibly more I might have missed. I feel the need to give a specific warning before going into this section, specifically due to how sensitive these topics are. If you are sensitive to any of these, please stop watching the video now. There's a reason why these two games are the least favorite of the three duologies mentioned. In fact, I hate both of these games so much because Why Is Love uses a commonly misrepresented disorder to be a quote-unquote murder disorder, and Her Journey? Okay, frankly, it's just easier to talk about both games as a collective rather than just one, since the problems I have with the portrayal of schizophrenia bleeds into Her Journey. Also, a little bit of a note, I will be calling the two main characters of these games Tom and Ella, because I really don't think they should have been self-insert type characters. This part is just me being nitpicky, but I'm not calling them you and her. Those names are dumb, and I don't care if it's supposed to be an insert yourself in the girl you like, because I will make clear that is terrible. I don't want to insert myself into this guy who has schizophrenia in the most stereotypical way possible and make the fictional girl I like be at fault. Okay, let's just start off with the portrayal of schizophrenia since, well, what can I even say, honestly? It seems like the developer only knew about it from movies and didn't even bother to do research. And I can prove it! In a study using 41 movies with a main character with schizophrenia, nearly 33% have characters that were murderous, and majority of the characters were portrayed as violent or a danger to themselves or others, as well as about 25% had the causation be through trauma. So yeah, it's not unlikely that the developer used movies as a basis rather than actual research. In terms of how schizophrenia is in reality, just so I cover all my bases, many sources, which I have linked in the description, such as psychosis in mass shootings, a systematic examination using publicly available data, and mass murders involving firearms and other methods in school, college, and university settings, findings from the Columbia Mass Murder Database, it is noted that it is more likely that someone who has some sort of mental illness or disorder, such as any sort of psychotic disorder or schizophrenia, are more likely to be the victims of these crimes rather than the perpetrators. In fact, majority of the perpetrators were not suspected to have severe mental illness. Unfortunately, we cannot ignore that yes, there have been cases where people with schizophrenia has caused harm to others. However, those are not the rule, they are the exceptions.
Majority of people with schizophrenia are just people trying to live their lives with their disorder. Coming back in to completely review the transition I had for this section. The portrayal of this disorder honestly rubbed me the wrong way ever since I played it, even though I am not a professional nor someone who has it. If I got any information wrong, let me know. Anyways, I got to a point where I tired myself out with thinking about it, and due to the next game, I stopped hating that as much and began hating the sequel game so much more, which you will get into why I hate it so much now.
She was never wrong. She was never at fault. She would never be the blame of the violence that Tom did, because that is complete bullshit and way too close to victim blaming. You don't get it, dear viewer. This is why I can at least excuse these games because, well, they were mistakes. I can easily give the developers the benefit of the doubt and say that the issues I had with those games were made out of ignorance and can be fixed. You can argue and say that the developer of this game made this out of ignorance, and I can believe it. However, you know what issue this game has that the other games don't? The issue is in the fucking premise! The whole reason why Ella goes on her journey is because the game tries so fucking hard for us to think that she was at fault. The game tries to frame it as if it's her fault that he tried to kill his mother. If his mother died, then it would be her fault. What? I'm sorry, did I miss how much Tom was dreaming of killing Ella? Did I miss how much he wanted to take a fucking gun and shoot up the school just to murder her? If he succeeded, it would be fucking victim blaming to say that she was in the wrong. She doesn't need his forgiveness. He doesn't deserve forgiveness. So what if he's mentally ill? Ooh, he still wanted to hurt her. Mental illness is never a fucking excuse. It's never an excuse. He cannot want to hurt her and make her need his forgiveness. That's not how the real world works. No girl is required to say yes if they're asked out. No means no. End of fucking story. Men are not entitled to women. If you ask a girl out, you are never entitled to her saying yes. You do not own her body. You do not own her. Don't you fucking dare act like Tom was in the fucking right, because he's not! He will never be in the fucking right because he wanted to kill her! He wanted to kill her! She never needed to go on that stupid journey because she never did anything wrong! Fuck off! Okay. Honestly, I have to ask, do I need sources to back up my claims, because this feels like it should be common sense. Yet, no, I wouldn't be surprised if I still get people saying that I'm being over dramatic and like, yeah, it's not that deep. This game feels like it was made by an edgy 12-year-old who got rejected by a girl he liked and was mad at her, so he made this game. And it made it so that she would be the one who should apologize and not him if he ever did this. This game feels like it's one step away from victim blaming, and all I had to do was let Ella get hurt, and now suddenly it's victim blaming. I am not going to be surprised if I'm told like I'm being too harsh or it's not that deep or what the fuck ever. It's just, while I am non-binary, I still had to grow up knowing the evil that men can do. Because the patriarchy, consciously or not, is always instilled into little girls and little boys. Because that's our society. I was always told when I was little to stay with my parents so I don't get taken and hurt. Because of social media, I have learned of how much men don't care, and how they will be protected more times than not, and the women victimized get nothing. I mean, it is estimated that 683,000 women are raped each year. 85% of intimate partner violence victims or domestic violence victims are women. There is so many things that is just wrong with this world, and I bring this up because this game, intentionally or not, is showing to the player that if you get rejected and you do something bad, that it is always the fault of the person who rejected you. That is not the case. This game tells little boys that it is okay if they want to hurt the girl who rejected them because she shouldn't have rejected them. It tells little girls that if they reject the person who asked them out and they say no, they're responsible for the actions the person they rejected did. I hate her journey. And when I say that, I mean this is the game that I absolutely despise the most. Why is love? If any, I really don't like it, but if anything, it was very just... But her journey? The message tries to tell you, like, not like guilt consume you, but it does it in the worst way possible. This is not the story where you should have given that message. She was never at fault, and you cannot gaslight me into thinking she was at fucking fault. She was never at fault. She never deserved to go on that journey. She never had to. She did not need to learn about his trauma or anything and be guilt-tripped into loving him. She did not need to. I don't care if she was pressured into saying no. She still said no. That's the end of fucking story. If anything, it's just a bit tragic, but also, you could think that she dodged a fucking bullet. But the game doesn't want you to think that. The game wants you to think that she is at complete fault, and she deserved everything bad that happened to her. That is why I hate this game. Honestly, I have nothing else to say about this game that hasn't been said already. Let's just end this.
Let's end it off with my thoughts through Bonzi Buddy, and because I don't feel like redoing the conclusion with my voice, I made this video because I see immense potential from the two developers mentioned. They could definitely make something great if they learn from their mistakes. While I can't say I enjoyed either Duologies, I can say I can see why people might enjoy this is why. Why is love, however, I really don't understand, but I'm not 14, so it might just be that. I really hope the developers are willing to take my criticism, and I am open to helping out if you need it, as I want these projects to show your potential and be great. I might have been a bit mean, I will admit. I get really passionate about some stuff and I can be a bit hot-headed, so to speak. With that being said,
I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you have a good day, night, or whatever. Bye!